أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم.
والسابقون الأولون من المهاجرين والأنصار والذين اتبعوهم بإحسان رضي الله عنهم ورضوا عنه وأعد لهم جنات تجري تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها أبدا ذلك الفوز العظيم.
الله أكبر كبيرا والحمد لله كثيرا وسبحان الله بكرة وأصيلا لا إله إلا الله وحده صدق وعده ونصر عبده وأعز جنده وهزم الأحزاب وحده.
For some, there have been people who have benefited wonderfully from it, but most people have not. Instead, they suffer this. This is the modern epidemic, and it's as misplaced and it's as fictitious. This is the plague of ADHD. Now, this is a map of the incidence of ADHD in America, or prescriptions for ADHD. Don't mistake me here. I don't mean to say there is no such thing as attention deficit disorder. I'm not qualified to say if there is such a thing. I know that a great majority of psychologists and paediatricians think there is such a thing. But it's still a matter of debate. What I do know for a fact is it's not an epidemic. These kids are being medicated as routinely as we had our tonsils taken out. And on the same whimsical basis, and for the same reason, medical fashion. Our children are living in the most intensely stimulating period in the history of the earth. They're being besieged with information and calls for their attention from every platform, computers, from iPhones, from advertising holdings, from hundreds of television channels. And we're penalizing them now for getting distracted. From what? Boring stuff. At school, for the most part. It seems to me it's not a coincidence totally that the incidence of ADHD has risen in parallel with the growth of standardized testing. Now, these kids are being given Ritalin and Adderall and all manner of things, often quite dangerous drugs, to get them focused and calm them down. But according to this, attention deficit disorder increases as you travel east across the country. People start losing interest in Oklahoma. They can hardly think straight in Arkansas. And by the time they get to Washington, they've lost it completely. And there are separate reasons for that, I believe. It's a fictitious epidemic. If you think of it, the arts, and I don't say this exclusively of the arts, I think it's also true of science and of maths, but I say about the arts particularly because they are the victims of this mentality currently, particularly. The arts especially address the idea of aesthetic experience. An aesthetic experience is one in which your senses are operating at their peak, when you're present in the current moment, when you're resonating with the excitement of this thing that you're experiencing, when you are fully alive. An anesthetic is when you shut your senses off and deaden yourself to what's happening. And a lot of these drugs are that. We're getting our children through education by anesthetizing them. And I think we should be doing the exact opposite. We shouldn't be putting them asleep. We should be waking them up to what they have inside of themselves. But the model we have is this. I believe we have a system of education that is modeled on the interests of industrialism and in the image of it. I'll give you a couple of examples. Schools are still pretty much organized on factory lines, ringing bells, separate facilities, specialized into separate subjects. We still educate children by batches. We put them through the system by age group. Why do we do that? Why is there this assumption that the most important thing kids have in common is how old they are? It's like the most important thing about them is their date of manufacture. You know what I mean? Well, I know kids who are much better than other kids at the same age in different disciplines, or at different times of the day, or better in smaller groups than in large groups, or sometimes they want to be on their own. If you're interested in the model of learning, you don't start from this production line mentality. It's essentially about conformity, and increasingly it's about that as you look at the growth of standardized testing and standardized curricula. And it's about standardization. I believe we've got to go.
And I want you to tell me if you think this was from one of the founding fathers, and if so, which one, okay? From each according to his ability, to each according to his needs.
I don't think that was a quote.
It sounds like one of them could say that, but I'm not sure.
Probably, but I don't know who.
You want me to tell you who said it?
Yeah.
How many senators are there in the U.S. Senate?
Oh my God.
You know this.
10.
I don't know, isn't it like 300 something? There's about 25 or more.
Only 2 in 5 Americans know that we have 3 branches of government and can name them: the legislative, judicial, and executive branches. Only 1 out of 5 know that we have 100 U.S. senators, even though we've had 100 U.S. senators for more than half a century, ever since Alaska and Hawaii came into the Union. And it's a nice, easy, round number, easy to remember.
How many senators are there in the United States?
Oh, I'm not even going there. I'm so bad at this stuff.
52?
More.
60?
More.
70?
More.
80. I don't know. 100.
Yes!
The biggest difference between the two is that socialism says that all workers should get an equal share in profit and property, while communism says that there shouldn't be money or ownership in general, and everyone should get as much as they need and work as much as they can.
So my generation is fed up with capitalism. 44% of American millennials prefer to live in a socialist country. So they feel that it doesn't make sense that we live in a highly technological world with 3D printing and AI and automation, and still we live like modern-day slaves.
What is your definition of a socialist?
The definition of socialism means that government controls all factors of production.
Provides like health care or things like that.
They're more for, I guess, business or like, yeah.
Never heard of a socialist.
Like Bernie Sanders.
I don't know who that is.
You don't know who he is?
I actually don't know the definition of a socialist specifically.
Someone who believes in group ownership of the resources to try to promote equality.
In theory, most people would agree with ideas like equality and mutual consideration and empathy and kindness, love even, why not? But in practice, it just doesn't happen, does it? In practice, we gravitate to the default state of our being, the default state of our primal survival instincts taking control, where self-benefit precedes everything else.
A non-profit group called the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation and YouGov asked 23,000 Americans whether they would rather live in a capitalist or socialist country. And here's the results. 59% said they prefer capitalism, with 34% preferring a socialist nation, as you would perhaps expect. But of the millennials in the survey, the majority said they would prefer to be in either a socialist, communist, or even a fascist country.
In the mid-1800s, Karl Marx began pushing an idea called communism, a near stateless society without class or capitalism where the working people, aka the proletariat, controlled the means of production. But you can't just jump straight from capitalism to communism, from a corrupt state to no state. You need a bridge. That bridge is called socialism. Socialism comes in many different forms, but the majority of those all share a few common factors. First, they aim to take the means of production away from individuals and corporations and place it in the hands of a government representing workers. You build up the workers' utopia, then at some point the government becomes superfluous because everything is running so smoothly, then the government goes away and you have, hey, communism.
It's a kind of utopia, just the fact that the whole world will mix up with each other, that in, I don't know, 70, 80 years, there will be no white people anymore and only cappuccino-colored people.
But that's the only way. This is the only solution. This is my way of thinking.
Mix up,
it's our only hope.
Communism is when all manufacturing or means of production are equally owned by all the members of a state. The intended result is to eliminate the capitalist-inspired class system where one class does all the work. The strongest criticism of the philosophy is that communism removes the incentive for people to work harder than they absolutely have to. It also leads to resentment of those who work less hard but receive the same.
You're a socialist or you're a capitalist, you're a communist or you're an anarchist. You have to pick a side, pick a political candidate, pick a political agenda.
Can you explain your sign to me a little?
It's essentially, you know, we will win. It's with the Party for Socialism and Liberation, and there's a picture of Che Guevara, the Cuban revolutionary, on it. It's basically like, we can do it, we can win, we've won before, and we can do it again.
Makes me tend to think communism is an answer.
I absolutely believe that socialism is the way to go.
My name is Marek Drelichowski, and I came 52 years ago from Poland. I know what communism is all about. I think most of the Americans got stupid, okay? And shut up, okay? You guys are too easy. You already forgot, okay? What
the Federal Reserve is actually a plank of the Communist Manifesto, a central bank?
As a communist, I know that that's not true.
One of the planks of Marx's Communist Manifesto was a central bank, which is what the Federal Reserve is.
It's not, this is not communism, it's capitalism.
That's not what the Federal Reserve is.
We're just getting signatures to get Karl Marx on the Democratic ballot to get him in the office next. So we're just going to get Karl in the White House so he can continue the communist agenda. But we still need the signatures to get him on the ballot and just get more communists in the White House signature there to support Karl Marx for president. Thanks for supporting Karl Marx for president.
If he decides to lead on and try to pick better decisions, I feel he would.
Continue with the Marxist economic policies to lead us to the utopia that we've all really hoped for.
What I don't understand is how is it that on the 2001 NAEP history exam, 52% of high school seniors chose Nazi Germany, Imperial Japan, or Fascist Italy as our ally, not the Soviet Union.
Hi, I'm Nick Gillespie with Reason TV. I'm here today with Mark Bauerlein, author of The Dumbest Generation, a provocative new book that says the digital age stupefies young Americans and jeopardizes our future. In fact, there's even a second subtitle which says, Don't Trust Anyone Under 30. Mark, what's the premise of the book?
Digital culture means this to most teenagers. It doesn't open them up to the great big world of ideas and artworks and documents and politics and foreign affairs, which is all out there on the internet. The potential is there. Instead, it gives them what teenagers really care about, other teenagers, access to one another. They're not going to the Smithsonian Institution website. When Nielsen ratings examine the most popular websites for young adults, 9 out of the top 10, teenagers, 9 out of the top 10 were for social networking. 55% of high school students spend less than 1 hour a week reading and studying for class. They spend 9 hours a week social networking. And this is what brought me into this work. Studies of leisure habits by young adults. And one thing we can say is that the leisure reading people do, young people do, the visits to museums that they do, the library visits that they do, those have gone down. And that's just natural because the menu of leisure options for teenagers and young adults has gotten bigger. Reading has a smaller portion on the menu that they have. And when you go into the average 15-year-old's bedroom now, it's a multimedia center. Yeah, there are a few books up there on the shelf. There's the laptop, the cell phone, video game console, BlackBerry, iPod, and all those diversions give them something a lot more compelling than the story of Antony and Cleopatra and Caesar. PBS was running a film festival. I never watch movies, but I was stuck with these. It was a foreign film festival, and they showed all the classics of Fellini and Fritz Lang and Charlie Chaplin and Orson Welles, and actually mostly foreign films. And I just got into it and saw, I don't understand all of this, but something about a lot of these images, it just sort of opened my mind a little bit. If I could go back to Maryland today and I was that age, I could always get online and hang out with my friends, or I could get on the cell phone and call people or go to teen blogs about my high school. And I could have remained stuck in adolescent world. And the adult world seems like on the other side.
But don't you feel that it's more likely that more kids will have an experience similar to yours? Because if you're roaming around on the internet, it's virtually impossible, or even on Netflix, it might be a mistake that you ordered the wrong movie and suddenly you get La Ventura, where you, in that vignette, you talked about the rules of the game, the atrociously overrated Renoir movie, right? But I mean, it just seems to me that the possibility of this stuff being thrown in their path is probably higher now, just because there's so much more of it out there and available.
Well, I think that with the big universe of the internet, it's an empowerment tool. It lets people go where they're already interested. It's disposed to them. And the teen ego is a really powerful, strong thing, especially the collective teen ego. And I'm not sure that if these things do happen by chance, that they stick with it. That's why the mentors in young people's lives are so important.
Yeah, and talk a little bit about that. I mean, who's to blame here? Or what are the forces that are making this, you know, what you're talking about? What are the forces behind that? And part of it certainly is the mentor, the gatekeeper class, right? I mean, these are, you know, these are Dr. Zaius's from Planet of the Apes who have lost their inner faith, right?
You know, it's something that I think I blame more than anyone else. I blame my colleagues, the humanities professors, who passed along an irreverence toward historical knowledge and literary understanding and civic understanding. They don't give students the conviction, if you don't read these books, you're not going to be a complete citizen, you're not going to be a complete individual. I think that too many of them want to be relevant. They don't want to be old fogies and fuddy-duddies and reactionaries and retrograde conservatives. They worry about, again, being on the other side of their students' world. And students need to learn when you're 18 years old, your friends aren't going to make you build your vocabulary. Your friends aren't going to make you respect the Venetian Republic of the late Renaissance, early Renaissance. You need to have someone come into your life and tell you, look, there's a great big world out there, and you've got to pull yourself out of the little tiny social world that you're in. And mentors have to be the ones to do that. And I think students want their teachers to do that a lot more. You know, they want their teachers to rebuke them for their adolescent diversions. I tell students in class all the time, you guys are lazy and ignorant, and don't tell me how busy you are. You're always talking about how busy you are. You watch 2 hours and 41 minutes of TV a day, and those are the latest ratings. And it's like you're the CEO of General Motors. You leave class, you flip open that cell phone to check in and see what's going on in your important lives, or you got to run into the library and check your Facebook page to see what's happening. You know, there are more important things to do. I don't think inspiration is a good motivation to vote for civic activity. One, you know, inspiring politicians come and go, and inspiration. Also, it's so much about you, how you feel, how this politician appeals to your needs. That's not a good basis for citizenship. You need to feel more. It's not about your emotional response, it's about your responsibility to guard your prerogatives. You got to look at the First Amendment real seriously, and you got to regard your leaders not just as figures of inspiration, but also figures of danger too. They are in power. And people in government over time are going to do what human beings naturally do, and that is sustain their power, expand it, and you've got to be a political player to limit them.
At the high school level, rather it starts in the elementary grades. There is a book called A is for Activist, which is part of Edina's elementary school curriculum. And this is kind of a montage of pages from that book. And it says things like this. It says, A is for activism, actively answering a call to action. Are you an activist? C is for co-op, and also creative counter to corporate vultures. There's a lot of people that work for companies. And you know, you can just picture the third grader coming home, Dad, are you a corporate vulture? I'm supposed to counter you if you are. It's just unbelievable. F, of course, is for feminist, and it's also for fairness in our pay. T is for trans. Now, you know, when I was a kid, T might stand for, I don't know, train or tuba, I don't know. There are all kinds of things T could stand for, but I picture the 9-year-old kid coming home and saying, T is for trans. What's a trans, Mommy? It's just extraordinary. And X, of course, X is for Malcolm X. Who else? So one of the things that we try to understand is where this comes from. This leftism that you see really shot through the Edina Public Schools from the elementary level to the high school level. Did it just kind of creep in inadvertently? That didn't seem likely. And we think that at least part of the answer, well, first of all, we think it's a conscious decision by the administration of the school district. And we think that one aspect of that decision, or one manifestation of that decision, is the adoption of the All for All plan, which happened in 2013. The All for All plan was intended to address racial achievement gaps, which exist in many schools. And the All for All plan mandated an intensive focus on race in everything that the school.
American way of life, because they want to implement these communist or Green Party goals?
Well, unfortunately, the environmental movement is targeting kindergartners, you know, to indoctrinate kindergartners through high school.
We will not have more trees or plants for oxygen.
So the planet's feeling sad. I don't know if you can see the tears there.
Dear Earth, get well soon.
This is my idea.
My idea for solving climate change.
We only have one Earth, and it is up to us to take care of it.
When I found I Matter, youth were driving it, youth were building the websites, youth were taking the action, youth were writing the legislation.
The youth of I Matter, they are the future. They become the face of climate change, and they can compel action just with their presence. I Matter transcends the normal politics of this conversation.
Our young people, kindergartners, you know, 6-year-olds, do not understand the value of freedom, what makes a society work or not work, why our government system is so wonderful. They don't understand that, but they do understand fear. And the idea is to use fear of a dead planet, you know, global catastrophe, to train them, literally train them to conform to the agenda of the environmental movement. The idea is to use fear of global warming catastrophe, of losing all the species. You take away the child's hope, you take away their dreams, and you force them, basically emotionally blackmailing them to conform to this. You become a vegetarian, ride your bike, walk or skateboard, this whole mentality of limitation, limitation, limitation. And the idea is that from this limitation, then the students will, just as they do in communist countries, they will just go along to get along. And so the weight of the world on the children's shoulders, we don't put a child in an emergency room and say, you know, you help this patient. That's too much for a child. We don't allow a child to drive. We don't allow a child to vote for that same reason. They don't have the emotional maturity. They don't have the frame of reference. And what is going on in our schools is absurd. It is putting children in an activist position when they cannot possibly understand the ramifications of the subject at hand. The Portland Climate Change Resolution.
This year are personalized learning, equity, there's that term again, math, I'm glad to see math made it in there, and restitution/restorative justice. Now, I'm a lawyer, and I actually know what restitution means. Restitution means that if you have improperly obtained something or inadvertently obtained something, you have to give it back. And I would dearly love to know what these teachers are talking about when they say that one of their principal focuses is restitution and restorative justice.
Restitution is self-discipline, written by Dawson. Just let him finish. Just let him finish. But nonetheless, that restitution is not just your definition of restitution.
I don't know. And restorative justice sounds good. So the email continues. Highlands has weathered its share of challenges over the years, whether in the design of our classroom learning spaces, engaging in multi-age learning, facing change to our outdoor learning spaces, considering what books to teach students about families, and now how to embrace ancestry, genetic code, and melanin, as well as how to challenge kids to be changeable.
Well, you spoke several times before about ideological subversion. That is a phrase that I'm afraid some Americans don't fully understand. When the Soviets used the phrase ideological subversion, what do they mean by it?
Ideological subversion is the process which is legitimate, overt, and open. You can see it with your own eyes. All you have to do, all American mass media has to do, is to unplug their bananas from their ears, open up their eyes, and they can see it. There is no mystery. There is nothing to do with espionage. I know that espionage intelligence gathering looks more romantic. It sells more deodorants through the advertising, probably. That's why your Hollywood producers are so crazy about James Bond type of thrillers. But in reality, the main emphasis of the KGB is not in the area of intelligence at all. According to my opinion and opinion of many defectors of my caliber, only about 15% of time, money, and manpower is spent on espionage as such. The other 85% is a slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in 4 basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The result you can see. Most of the people who graduated in the 60s, dropouts or half-baked intellectuals, are now occupying the positions of power in the government, civil service, business, mass media, educational system. You are stuck with them. You cannot get rid of them. They are contaminated. They are programmed to think and react to certain stimuli in a certain pattern. You cannot change their mind, even if you expose them to authentic information, even if you prove that white is white and black is black, you still cannot change the basic perception and the logic of behavior. In other words, these people, the process of demoralization is complete and irreversible. To get rid society of these people, you need another 20 or 15 years to educate a new generation of patriotically minded and common sense people who would be acting in favor and in the interests of the United States society.
And yet these people who've been programmed and, as you say, in place, and who are favorable to an opening with the Soviet concept, these are the very people who would be marked for extermination in this country?
Most of them, yes. Simply because the psychological shock when they will see in future what the beautiful society of equality and social justice means in practice, obviously they will revolt. They will be very unhappy, frustrated people. And the Marxist-Leninist regime does not tolerate these people. Obviously, they will join the links of dissenters, dissidents. Unlike in present United States, there will be no place for dissent in future Marxist-Leninist America. Here you can get popular like Daniel Ellsberg and filthy rich like Jane Fonda for being dissident, for criticizing your Pentagon. In future, these people will be simply squashed like cockroaches. Nobody is going to pay them nothing for their beautiful, noble ideas of equality. This they don't understand, and it will be the greatest shock for them, of course. The demoralization process in the United States is basically completed already. For the last 25 years. Actually, it's overfulfilled, because demoralization now reaches such areas where previously not even Comrade Andropov and all his experts would even dream of such a tremendous success. Most of it is done by Americans to Americans, thanks to lack of moral standards. As I mentioned before, exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camp, he will refuse to believe it until he is going to receive a kick in his fat bottom. When a military boot crashes his, then he will understand, but not before that. That's the tragic of the situation of demoralization. So basically America is stuck with demoralization, and unless, even if you start right now, here, this minute, you start educating new generation of Americans, it will still take you 15 to 20 years to turn the tide of ideological perception of reality back to normalcy and patriotism. The next stage is destabilization. This time, subverter does not care about your ideas and the patterns of your consumption. Whether you eat junk food and get fat and flabby, it doesn't matter anymore. This time, and it takes only from 2 to 5 years to destabilize a nation, what matters is essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems. And you can see it quite clearly that in some areas, in such sensitive areas as defense and economy, the influence of Marxist-Leninist ideas in the United States is absolutely fantastic. I could never believe it 14 years ago when I landed in this part of the world that the process will go that fast. The next stage, of course, is crisis. It may take only up to 6 weeks to bring a country to the verge of crisis. You can see it in Central America now. And after crisis, with a violent change of power, structure, and economy, you have so-called the period of normalization. It may last indefinitely. Normalization is a cynical expression borrowed from Soviet propaganda. When the Soviet tanks moved into Czechoslovakia in '68, Comrade Brezhnev said, "Now the situation in brotherly Czechoslovakia is normalized." This is what will happen in the United States if you allow all these schmucks to bring the country to crisis, to promise people all kind of goodies and the paradise on earth, to destabilize your economy, to eliminate the principle of free market competition, and to put a big brother government in Washington, D.C., with benevolent dictators like Walter Mondale, who will promise lots of things, never mind whether the promises are fulfillable or not. He will go to Moscow to kiss the bottoms of new generation of Soviet assassins. Never mind, he will create false illusions that the situation is under control. Situation is not under control. Situation is disgustingly out of control. Most of the American politicians, media, and educational system trains another generation of people who think they are living at a peacetime. False. The United States is in the state of war, undeclared total war against the basic principles and the foundations of this system. And the initiator of this war is not Comrade Andropov, of course. It's the system. however ridiculous it may sound, the world communist system or the world communist conspiracy, whether I scare some people or not, I don't give a hoot. If you are not scared by now, nothing can scare you. But you don't have to be paranoid about it. What actually happens now, that unlike myself, you have literally several years to live on unless the United States wake up. The time bomb is ticking. With every second, the disaster is coming closer and closer. Unlike myself, you will have nowhere to defect to, unless you want to live in Antarctica with penguins. This is it. This is the last country of freedom and possibility.
Okay, so what do we do? What is your recommendation to the American people?
Well, the immediate thing that comes to my mind is, of course, there must be a very strong national effort to educate people in the spirit of real patriotism, number one. Number two, to explain them the real danger of socialist, communist, whatever, welfare state, big brother government. If people will fail to grasp the impending danger of that development, nothing ever can help United States. You may kiss goodbye to your freedom, including freedoms to homosexuals, to prison inmate. All this freedom will vanish, evaporate in 5 seconds, including your precious lives. The second thing, the moment at least part of the United States population is convinced that the danger is real, they have to force their government. And I'm not talking about sending letters, signing petitions, and all this beautiful, noble activity. I'm talking about forcing United States government to stop aiding communism. Because there is no other problem more burning and urgent than to stop the Soviet military-industrial complex from destroying whatever is left of the free world. And it is very easy to do. No credits, no technology, no money, no political or diplomatic recognition, and of course no such idiocy as grain deals to USSR. The Soviet people, 270 millions of Soviets, will be eternally thankful to you if you stop aiding a bunch of murderers who sit now in Kremlin and whom President Reagan respectfully calls government. They do not govern anything, least of all such complexity as the Soviet economy. So two very simple, maybe too simplistic answers or solutions, but nevertheless they are the only solutions. Educate yourself, understand what's going on around you. You are not living at a time of peace. You are in a state of war, and you have precious little time to save yourself. You don't have much time, especially if you are talking about young generation. There's not much time left for convulsions to the beautiful disco music. Very soon it will go, just overnight. If we are talking about capitalists or wealthy businessmen, I think they are selling the rope on which they will hang very soon. If they don't stop, if they cannot curb their unsettled desire for profit, and if they keep on trading with the monster of the Soviet communism, they are going to hang very soon. And they will pray to be killed, but unfortunately they will be sent to Alaska probably to manage industry of slaves. It's simplistic. I know it sounds unpleasant. I know Americans don't like to listen to things which are unpleasant. But I have defected not to tell you the stories about such idiocy as microfilm, James Bond type espionage. This is garbage. You don't need any espionage anymore. I have come to talk about survival. It's a question of survival of this system. You may ask me, what is it in for me? Survival, obviously, because unlike, as I said, I am now in your boat. If we sing together, we'll sing beautifully together. There is no other place on this planet to defect to.